You are standing at Giza on the western plateau overlooking the Nile Valley, in the 4th year of the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, approximately 2566 BCE. Behind you, the desert stretches westward into infinity, the realm of the dead, the direction of the setting sun, the gateway to the Duat. Before you, rising from the bedrock with geometric precision that seems to defy human capability, is something that will endure for 46 centuries and counting. The Great Pyramid is not yet complete. You can see thousands of workers, perhaps 20,000, perhaps more, swarming across its rising faces like ants on a monument to the gods themselves. Copper chisels ring against limestone. Wooden sledges groan under the weight of stone blocks, each weighing 2.5 tons, being hauled up ramps of mud brick and gypsum. Overseers shout instructions. Priests chant prayers to ensure the work proceeds in accordance with Ma'at, cosmic order. The smell of sweat and stone dust hangs in the desert air. But even incomplete, even still under construction, the pyramid is already overwhelming. It rises over 300 feet into the sky, higher than any building that exists anywhere on Earth, higher than any building that will exist for the next 4,000 years. This base covers 13 acres. It will contain an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks when complete. And it is faced with gleaming white Tura limestone, so finely cut that the joints between blocks are nearly invisible, creating 4 perfect triangular faces that catch and hold the sun's light. This is not architecture as we understand it. This is theology made manifest in stone. This is a machine for resurrection. This is a geometric argument that the king who will be buried at its heart, Khufu, the living Horus, the son of Ra, will not die but will ascend to heaven, join the gods, and participate in eternity itself. In our previous episode, we traced the birth of Egyptian immortality theology from simple pit graves to Djosir's revolutionary step pyramid. We watched a culture develop the fundamental conviction that death is not final, that the body can be preserved, that eternal existence is achievable through proper preparation and provision. But the step pyramid, magnificent as it was, represented an incomplete vision. Its stepped form provided a literal stairway for the king's spirit to climb to heaven, yes, but it was still a stairway, still a laborious ascent, still bound to the earth even as it reached toward the sky. What you are witnessing here at Giza is the perfection of that vision. The smooth-sided pyramid does not provide steps to climb. It is itself a ray of sunlight turned to stone, a geometric representation of the sun's light descending from heaven to touch the earth. The pyramid captures the essential mystery of the sun god Ra. Light descends from the infinite sky, touches the finite earth, and provides the energy that makes life possible. When Ra sets in the west, he descends into the Duat to battle chaos and death. When he rises in the east, he proves that death can be overcome, that darkness is temporary, that resurrection is real. The pyramid embodies this solar theology in pure geometric form. Its 4 faces orient precisely to the cardinal directions. Its apex, the pyramid ion, once covered in gold or electrum to catch the first and last rays of the sun, represents the primordial mound, the Benben stone, the first solid matter to emerge from the waters of chaos at the moment of creation. To be buried beneath a pyramid is to place yourself at the cosmic axis, the point where creation began and where it is renewed each day with the sunrise. To ascend through a pyramid is to reverse the descent into death, to climb back toward the light, to join Ra in his solar bark as it sails across the sky in eternal circuit. This is what the Pyramid Age achieved. The transformation of resurrection from theological hope into architectural reality, from abstract belief into concrete technology. Over the course of the 4th, 5th, and 6th dynasties, roughly 500 years, from 2613 to 2181 BCE, Egypt will build more than 90 pyramids, each one a statement in stone that death has been defeated, that the king buried within has transcended mortality, that eternity has been achieved. But the pyramids are not merely buildings, and they are not silent. Beginning with the Pyramid of Unas at the end of the 5th dynasty, the burial chambers themselves will begin to speak. The walls will be carved with hieroglyphic texts. Hundreds of spells, incantations, and instructions forming the oldest religious writings in human history. These are the pyramid texts, and they will tell us, in the voices of the ancient Egyptians themselves, exactly what they believed happened when a king died, exactly how he transformed from mortal ruler to immortal god, exactly what he must say and do and become to achieve resurrection. Over the next hour, we will trace the evolution of the pyramid from Djoser's stepped prototype to the geometric perfection of Giza. We will explore the solar theology that drove pyramid construction and the stellar theology that competed with it. We will descend into the burial chambers of Unas, Teti, and Pepi to read the actual words carved there 43 centuries ago. We will encounter gold, not yet in the massive quantities we will see in later episodes, but already present, already understood as divine flesh, as the incorruptible material of the gods. And we will confront a question that has haunted Egyptologists since the pyramids were first opened. Why did pyramid building stop? What happened at the end of the Old Kingdom that made these enormous investments in royal immortality suddenly seem futile or impossible? But that ending is still centuries away. Here, in the reign of Khufu, we stand at the apex of the Pyramid Age, watching the greatest structure of the ancient world rise stone by stone toward the sky. Let us begin by understanding how Egypt arrived at this moment, how the stepped pyramid evolved into the geometric pyramid, how mud brick gave way to stone, and how the theology of Ascension became the driving obsession of an entire civilization. The step pyramid of Djoser, which we encountered at the end of our previous episode, stands alone at Saqqara for only a few decades before other kings begin to imitate and improve upon Imhotep's revolutionary design. But these early attempts reveal something crucial. The pyramid is not yet perfected. The builders are still experimenting, still learning, still working out the engineering and theological implications of building mountains in stone. Djoser's immediate successors attempt to build their own step pyramids, but most remain unfinished. At Zoyet El Arian, between Giza and Saqqara, there is an enormous excavation. A pyramid that was begun but never completed, its owner's name uncertain, its purpose abandoned. These failures suggest that building a step pyramid required resources and organizational capacity that not every king could muster. But one king could. One king would take Imhotep's vision and transform it into something even more audacious. Sneferu, the first king of the 4th dynasty, who comes to the throne around 2613 BCE, is the most prolific pyramid builder in Egyptian history. He will construct not one pyramid, not two, but at least 3 and possibly 4. His reign of perhaps 24 to 48 years, the exact length is debated, represents the moment when the pyramid evolves from step to smooth-sided, from experimental to perfected. Let us travel to Midam, about 50 miles south of Cairo, where Sneferu begins his pyramid-building career. Here stands a structure that reveals the transition in progress, the Midam Pyramid, also called the Collapsed Pyramid because of its current appearance. Sneferu begins by building a traditional step pyramid, 7 or 8 levels rising in diminishing tiers. But then, in an extraordinary decision, he changes the design. He fills in the steps with limestone casing blocks, transforming the stepped exterior into a smooth, sloping surface. The pyramid is no longer a stairway but a single, unified geometric form. This is a profound theological shift. The step pyramid says, "The king climbs to heaven." The smooth-sided pyramid says, "The king is heaven descended to earth." The smooth sides represent a ray of sunlight, a pathway of divine radiance connecting sky and earth. The pyramid becomes not a stairway for the king to use but a form that embodies his divine nature. However, and this is crucial to understanding the evolution of pyramid building, the Midam Pyramid suffers a partial collapse, possibly in ancient times, possibly later. The outer casing stones have fallen away, leaving the stepped core visible within a mountain of rubble. Whether this collapse happened during construction, shortly after completion, or centuries later is debated. But the important point is this: the builders learned from this failure. Sneferu, undeterred by whatever problems occurred at Midam, moves north to Dashur and begins 2 more pyramids. The first is one of the most distinctive pyramids in Egypt, the Bent Pyramid. Stand with me at Dashur watching the bent pyramid take shape. It rises at a steep angle, approximately 54 degrees, for about half its height. Then, abruptly, the angle changes. The upper half slopes more gently, at about 43 degrees, giving the pyramid its distinctive bent profile. Why this change in angle? The traditional explanation is structural crisis. The builders realized the steep angle was creating too much pressure on the internal chambers and corridors, risking collapse. So they reduced the angle mid-construction to reduce the weight and stress on the structure. This interpretation suggests the Egyptians were learning pyramid engineering in real time, adjusting their designs based on structural feedback. But there may also be a theological dimension to this change. The steeper lower slope reaches more aggressively toward heaven, emphasizing ascension. The gentler upper slope creates a more stable, enduring form, emphasizing permanence. The combination might represent a synthesis. The king's ascent, Nihe, cyclical eternity, achieved through an enduring structure, Jet, permanent eternity. What we know for certain is that the bent pyramid represents a learning process, and the lessons learned are immediately applied. Because even while the bent pyramid is under construction, Sneferu begins a third pyramid just north of it at Dashur. This one will incorporate everything learned from Midam and the bent pyramid. This one will achieve the perfect form. The red pyramid, so called for the reddish hue of the local limestone from which it is built, rises at the gentler angle of 43 degrees. It is the first successful smooth-sided pyramid, the first true pyramid in the geometric sense. It stands 341 feet high, its base covering approximately 12 acres. Its internal chambers are corbel vaulted, with the ceiling stones progressively overlapping to create a pointed arch that distributes weight more effectively than a flat ceiling. This is the prototype for all pyramids that follow. This is the form that Sneferu's son, Khufu, will perfect at Giza. The theological implications are clear. The pyramid is a fixed form now, a geometric ideal. Variations will occur in size and proportion, but the essential shape, for smooth triangular faces meeting at an apex, oriented precisely to the cardinal directions, is now established. But before we ascend to Giza to witness Khufu's Great Pyramid, we must understand what lies inside these pyramids. We must descend into the darkness, into the burial chambers at the heart of these mountains of stone, and encounter the king for whom all this labor, all this stone, all this theological ambition exists. The pyramid from the outside is public, visible, declaring the king's power and divine status to anyone who approaches. But the pyramid's true purpose lies hidden within, in the narrow passages, the subterranean chambers, the secret spaces where the king's body rests, and where his transformation from mortal to God takes place. Let us descend into the red pyramid of Sneferu, entering through the original entrance on the north face, approximately 90 feet above ground level. The choice of the north face is deliberate and theological. The north is the direction of the imperishable stars, the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, that will eternally around the celestial pole. To the Egyptians, these stars represent the imperishable spirits of dead kings, the Aku, the transfigured blessed dead who have achieved eternal life. The entrance passage descends at an angle of approximately 27 degrees. You must bend nearly double to fit in this corridor, which is only about 3.5 feet high. This is not a processional way meant for comfortable movement. This is a symbolic journey into the underworld, a descent into death from which the king will ascend transformed. The passage is rough-cut into the stone, not finely finished like the outer casing. As you descend, the temperature drops. The air grows heavy. You are moving into the earth, into the realm of the dead, into a space that has not been designed for the living. After descending approximately 200 feet, the passage levels out and continues horizontally for another 60 feet before opening into the first chamber. This antechamber is corbel vaulted, rising nearly 40 feet to a pointed ceiling. The walls are bare limestone, undecorated, speaking only in the language of stone and geometry. Another short passage leads to a second chamber, identical in size and construction to the first. And finally, a third chamber, the burial chamber itself, where the king's sarcophagus once rested. This sarcophagus is gone now, removed in antiquity, either by robbers or by later rulers who reused the stone. But we can reconstruct what this space once contained. A rectangular stone sarcophagus, carved from a single block of granite or basalt, positioned precisely in the center of the chamber. No lid has been found. Possibly it was wooden, possibly the sarcophagus was never used, possibly it was removed intact when the burial was relocated. The burial chamber is the heart of the pyramid, the sacred center around which millions of tons of stone have been carefully arranged. But in Sneferu's pyramids, these chambers are undecorated. The walls are blank. There are no hieroglyphs, no images, no texts to guide the king through the afterlife. This silence is temporary. Within a century, these walls will speak. But before we encounter the pyramid texts, we must first experience the perfection of pyramid architecture at Giza, where Sneferu's son Khufu will build the most sophisticated, most precisely constructed, most geometrically perfect pyramid ever achieved. Return with me now to Giza, but move forward in time to the pyramid's completion. It is approximately 2540 BCE. Khufu is dead, mummified, and entombed within the mountain of stone he spent 23 years building. His son Khufu is now pharaoh, and he is constructing his own pyramid beside his father's, slightly smaller in base but appearing taller because it is built on higher ground and retains its pyramidion at the apex. You stand in the desert west of these pyramids at sunset. The sun, Ra in his evening form as Adam, the complete one, descends toward the western horizon. The pyramids catch this dying light and seem to glow, their white limestone casing stones reflecting the sun's rays so brilliantly that the structures appear made not of stone but of captured sunlight. This is the moment when the theology of the pyramids becomes viscerally clear. The pyramids are representations of sunlight itself, of the rays that descend from heaven to touch earth. In later Egyptian texts, the word for pyramid mer is written with a determinative sign that looks like a pyramid with rays of light descending from its apex. The pyramids are light made solid, divinity made tangible, the connection between heaven and earth rendered in millions of tons of precisely cut and fitted stone. Khufu's pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is the culmination of everything pyramid architecture can achieve. Let us examine its precision, because this precision is not merely technical virtuosity. It is theological necessity. The pyramid must be perfect because it is the vehicle for divine transformation. Any flaw, any deviation from cosmic order, might compromise its function. The base of the Great Pyramid is a square measuring approximately 756 feet on each side. The accuracy of this square is extraordinary. The four sides differ in length by no more than 8 inches, an error of less than 0.1%. The base is level to within 1 inch across its entire 756-foot length. The four sides are oriented to the cardinal directions with an average error of only 3 minutes and 6 seconds of arcade, about 1/20th of a degree. This precision required sophisticated surveying techniques. The Egyptians used the stars to establish true north, likely using the circumpolar stars and their circuit around the celestial pole. They used water-filled trenches cut into the bedrock to establish a level plane. They used measuring rods, plumb bobs, set squares, and sighting tools whose sophistication we can only infer from the results they achieved. The pyramid rises at an angle of approximately 51 degrees, 50 minutes, 40 seconds, creating a ratio between height and base circumference that closely approximates pi, though whether this was intentional or a consequence of other proportional choices is debated. What is not debated is that this angle creates a pyramid of sublime proportions, neither too steep nor too shallow, achieving a perfect balance between earthly foundation and heavenly aspiration. The pyramid originally stood 481 feet high, taller than a 40-story building. It was faced with approximately 144,000 casing stones, each weighing multiple tons, fitted together so precisely that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. These casing stones were Tura limestone, the finest quality limestone in Egypt, quarried from the eastern bank of the Nile near modern Cairo and transported across the river on barges during the annual flood. At the apex was the pyramid ion, the capstone, completing the geometric form. This pyramid ion was likely covered in gold or electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, making it catch and reflect the sun's light, visible for miles, a point of divine radiance marking the place where earth and heaven meet. Most of the casing stones are now gone, removed over the centuries to build Cairo, leaving the stepped core blocks exposed. The pyramid ion is lost. But in Khufu's time, the pyramid would have been a smooth, gleaming, geometrically perfect artificial mountain, more impressive by far than any natural mountain, declaring to anyone who saw it that human will, organized labor, and theological vision could create something worthy of the gods themselves. But the pyramid is not merely an external monument. Its true purpose lies within, in the internal passages and chambers where the dead king awaits transformation. The Great Pyramid contains the most complex internal chamber system of any pyramid. Unlike the simple descending passage and burial chamber of earlier pyramids, Khufu's pyramid contains multiple passages, 3 major chambers, and sophisticated architectural features that suggest the theology of royal resurrection was itself evolving and becoming more complex. Let us enter through the original entrance on the north face and trace the path the king's body took to its final resting place. The descending passage plunges downward into the bedrock beneath the pyramid, eventually reaching a subterranean chamber carved from the living rock more than 90 feet below the pyramid's base. This chamber appears unfinished, its floor irregular, its purpose uncertain. Some Egyptologists believe this was the original intended burial chamber, later abandoned in favor of chambers built higher in the pyramid's mass. From the descending passage, an ascending passage branches upward. This passage, narrow and steep, climbs at approximately 26 degrees through the pyramid's internal masonry. After more than 100 feet, it opens into a space of breathtaking architectural drama, the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery is one of the most impressive architectural spaces of the ancient world. It rises 28 feet high, its corbelled walls stepping inward as they ascend, creating a pointed vault. It is only 7 feet wide at floor level but continues upward for nearly 150 feet, sloping at the same 26-degree angle as the ascending passage. Walking up the Grand Gallery is like ascending through the body of a god, through a space that has no practical function but every symbolic one. This is the path of transformation, the journey from death to resurrection, from earth to heaven, from mortal flesh to divine being. At the top of the Grand Gallery is a horizontal passage leading to the king's chamber, the true burial chamber, positioned in the very heart of the pyramid, approximately 140 feet above the base, surrounded on all sides by millions of tons of protective stone. The king's chamber is a rectangular room measuring approximately 34 feet by 17 feet, with a flat ceiling 19 feet overhead. The walls and floor are red granite from Aswan, quarried 600 miles to the south and transported down the Nile. The ceiling consists of 9 massive granite beams, each weighing approximately 40 to 50 tons. Above these beams are 5 relieving chambers, separated by additional granite beams, designed to distribute the enormous weight of the pyramid above the burial chamber. This engineering is remarkable, but its purpose is simple: to protect the king's body. The sarcophagus must not be crushed. The chamber must endure forever. The stone walls must stand inviolate until the end of time. In this chamber rests a red granite sarcophagus, still in place after more than 45 centuries. It is empty now. Khufu's mummy was removed or destroyed in antiquity, possibly during the first intermediate period when royal tombs throughout Egypt were violated. The sarcophagus lid is gone. But the sarcophagus itself, carved from a single block of granite, remains precisely where it was placed during the pyramid's construction. Actually, that last point is significant. The sarcophagus is slightly wider than the ascending passage. It could not have been brought into the chamber after the pyramid was complete. It must have been positioned in the king's chamber during construction, before the pyramid rose around it. The chamber was built around the sarcophagus, not the other way around. This tells us something profound. The entire pyramid was planned from the beginning with this specific stone box as its purpose and center. But the Great Pyramid contains one more mystery: the Queen's Chamber. Halfway up the ascending passage, a horizontal corridor branches off, leading to a second chamber positioned on the pyramid's central vertical axis but at a lower level than the King's Chamber. This chamber is smaller, measuring approximately 17 by 19 feet, with a peaked ceiling. 2 is empty, its purpose unclear. The traditional name, Queen's Chamber, is a modern misnomer. Egyptian queens were not buried in pyramids with their husbands but in smaller pyramids of their own or in mastaba tombs. So what is this chamber's function? One possibility is that it was designed to house the king's Ka statue, a statue serving as an anchor point for the king's Ka, his spiritual double. Another possibility is that it was an alternative burial chamber, planned before the final decision was made to use the king's chamber. A third possibility, more speculative but compelling, is that it was designed for the sarcophagus or burial equipment of the king's viscera, the internal organs removed during mummification and preserved separately in what would later be called canopic jars. But the truth is, we do not know. The Great Pyramid guards its secrets even after 46 centuries of investigation. What we do know is this: every feature of the pyramid, its orientation, its proportions, its internal passages and chambers, was designed with theological precision. This was not merely a tomb but a transformation engine, a device for turning a dead king into a living god. And the theology that drove this transformation was solar. Ra, the sun god, was supreme. The king, in death, must join Ra in his solar bark, sailing across the sky by day and through the dew by night, participating in Ra's eternal cycle of death and rebirth, becoming himself a manifestation of divine solar power. But there was another theology, another pathway to immortality, that competed with and complemented the solar theology. This was the stellar theology, the belief that the king ascends not to join the sun but to join the imperishable stars of the northern sky. And it is this stellar theology that will first be written down, carved into pyramid walls, giving us the pyramid texts, the oldest religious scriptures in human existence. We must now move forward in time, from the 4th dynasty to the end of the 5th dynasty, approximately 2375 BCE. We are at Saqqara, standing before the Pyramid of Unas, the last king of the 5th dynasty. This pyramid is smaller than the Giza pyramids. Its base measures only about 220 feet per side, and it originally stood perhaps 141 feet high. It is modest by 4th dynasty standards, suggesting that the resources available for pyramid construction have diminished, or that the theology has shifted, or both. But what Unas's pyramid lacks in size, it compensates for with something unprecedented, something that will transform our understanding of Egyptian afterlife theology forever. Descend with me into Unas's pyramid. We enter through the standard north face entrance, moving down the descending passage, then through a horizontal corridor, past the antechamber until we reach the burial chamber itself. And the walls are speaking. Every surface, walls, corridors, the gabled ceiling above the sarcophagus, is covered with vertical columns of hieroglyphic text, carved into the limestone and filled with blue-green pigment to make them stand out against the white stone. There are hundreds of these columns, containing approximately 750 individual spells or utterances, as Egyptologists call them. These are the pyramid texts, the oldest substantial body of religious literature in human history. They are the culmination of centuries, possibly millennia, of oral tradition, theological development, and ritual practice, now finally committed to written form. And they are not addressed to the living. They are addressed to the dead king lying in the sarcophagus. They are instructions, spells, incantations, and declarations that guide him through death, through transformation, through resurrection, and into eternal life. Stand here in this chamber, lit by your torch, for there is no natural light here. None has ever penetrated this space. This is a realm of absolute darkness except when we bring fire. Look at the hieroglyphs glowing in the flickering light. These are not decorative. These are not commemorative. These are functional magical texts, words of power that become real through their inscription and recitation. Let us read some of these texts, translating them from the ancient Egyptian, hearing the voices of priests 43 centuries dead speaking to their king. Utterance 245. O Unas, you have not departed dead, you have departed alive. You sit upon the throne of Osiris, your scepter in your hand, that you may give orders to the living, the handle of your lotus-shaped scepter in your hand. Give orders to those of the mysterious places. This is a declaration of continued existence. The king has not died, he has transformed. He maintains his royal authority, his power to command, his position on the throne. Death is not loss of status but elevation of status, from earthly king to cosmic king. Utterance 273 to 274. The sky is overcast, the stars are obscured, the celestial vaults quiver, the bones of the earth gods tremble and movement ceases, when they see Unas appearing as a god, living on his fathers, feeding on his mothers. Unas is Lord of wisdom whose mother knows not his name. The dignity of Unas is in the sky. His power is in the horizon, like that of his father Adam who begot him. Unas is he who eats humans and lives on gods. This is the famous Cannibal Hymn, one of the most startling and primal texts in the pyramid texts. It depicts the deceased king as a predatory god who hunts, kills, and devours other gods to absorb their power. The theology here is archaic, perhaps deliberately shocking. It emphasizes the king's transformation into a being of such power that even the gods fear him. By consuming the gods, he takes their ka, their life force, their magical power, making himself supreme. Modern readers often find this text disturbing, even barbaric. But we must understand it in context. This is not literal cannibalism but magical appropriation. The king must become more powerful than any single god, must transcend the limitations of any single divine form, must incorporate all divine attributes into himself. The violent language expresses the totality of his transformation and his absolute supremacy in the afterlife. Utterance 302. The reed floats of the sky are set in place for Re that he may cross on them to the horizon, to Horikti. The reed floats of the sky are set in place for Horikti that Horikti may cross on them to Re, to the horizon. The reed floats of the sky are set in place for Unas that he may cross on them to the horizon, to Re. The reed floats of the sky are set in place for Unas that he may cross on them to the horizon, to Horikti. This utterance identifies the king with Ra, Re, and Horikti, Horus of the horizon, a solar deity. The reed floats are a celestial ferry, a means of crossing the waters of the sky. The king joins the sun god's circuit, crossing the sky by day, descending into the Duat by night, emerging at dawn reborn. This is solar theology in its purest form. The king becomes Ra, participates in Ra's eternal cycle, achieves immortality through identification with the sun. Utterance 213. You shall purify yourself with your 4 Nemset jars and your 4 Abay jars. Your bones are iron and your members are the imperishable stars. A ladder to the sky is set up for you that you may ascend on it to the sky, and you ascend upon the smoke of the great incense. This utterance combines multiple theologies. The purification with water jars echoes temple rituals performed on earth. The transformation of bones to iron or perhaps meteoritic iron from the sky suggests the king's body becomes indestructible, celestial. The ladder to the sky represents the physical means of ascension. Some scholars believe this refers to the pyramid itself, others to a ritual ladder used in ceremonies, still others to a cosmic ladder made of light or divine substance. The imperishable stars are crucial. These are the circumpolar stars, the stars that never set, that will eternally around the north celestial pole. In Egyptian astronomy, these stars represent the Aku, the transfigured blessed dead who have achieved immortality. To become an imperishable star is to achieve jet, permanent, unchanging eternal existence. Utterance 217. The sky is clear, Sothis lives, because I am a living one, the son of Sothis. The two Enneads have purified me in Ursa Major, the imperishable stars. My house in the sky will not perish, my throne on earth will not be destroyed, for I am a Ba, for I am a spirit. Sothis is the star Sirius, whose heliacal rising, its first appearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility, coincided with the beginning of the Nile's annual flood. Sothis was identified with the goddess Isis. The king declares himself the son of Sothis, linking himself to the cosmic cycles that govern Egypt's agricultural prosperity. Ursa Major, the Great Bear constellation, contains the circumpolar stars. The king places himself among these imperishable stars. He declares his house in heaven, his stellar existence, and his throne on earth, his memorial cult, his monuments, will endure forever. He has become a Ba, a soul capable of movement and transformation. He has become a spirit, an Ak, a being of light and power. Walk with me through the rest of Unaz's burial chamber, reading the spells carved on every wall. There are utterances to protect the king from serpents and scorpions in the underworld. There are utterances identifying him with various gods, Osiris, Ra, Horus, Atum, Geb, Nut. There are utterances describing his ascension. Climbing a ladder, ascending on smoke, being lifted by the gods, flying on the back of a celestial bird. There are utterances describing his rebirth. He emerges from the womb of Nut, the sky goddess. He is nursed by divine mothers. He is purified in celestial lakes. He is clothed in divine garments. He is given scepters of power, crowns of authority, the Ankh of life. There are utterances establishing his position in the afterlife hierarchy. He sits among the gods in judgment. He commands the spirits of the dead. He controls the forces of nature. He becomes one of the cosmic powers that sustain Ma'at, the order of the universe. And there are utterances that are deeply moving in their humanity, their expression of the fundamental human hope in the face of death. Utterance 422. Unaz was not sent away. Unaz was not turned away. Unaz has not perished. O you who command those whose castes are empty, you shall not command that Unaz's ka be empty, for Unaz is your protector. This is a plea almost desperate, insisting that the king has not been rejected, has not failed, has not died the true death of annihilation. His ka is not empty, he still exists, still has substance, still has power. The pyramid texts are not systematic theology. They contradict one another. They present multiple, competing visions of the afterlife. In some utterances, the king ascends to the sky to join Ra. In others, he descends to the Duat to rule with Osiris. In some, he becomes a star. In others, he becomes the moon. In some, he flies as a bird. In others, he sails in a boat. This multiplicity is not a flaw but a feature. The Egyptians are not presenting a single, dogmatic account of what happens after death. They are presenting every possible means of achieving immortality, every theological pathway, every ritual and spell and identification that might work. This is magical insurance, comprehensive coverage against the possibility of failure. And it is precisely this comprehensiveness, this refusal to rely on a single method or theology, that characterizes Egyptian afterlife practice for the next 2,000 years. The Book of the Dead, which we will encounter in later episodes, is a direct descendant of the pyramid texts, expanded, democratized, available to non-royals, but fundamentally the same idea. Give the deceased every possible tool, every possible spell, every possible piece of knowledge that might help them achieve eternal life. But the pyramid texts also reveal something else. The deep anxiety underlying all this theological elaboration. The texts protest too much. They insist too strongly that the king has not died, has not been rejected, has not failed. This insistence suggests an underlying doubt, an uncertainty about whether any of this actually works. And this doubt is justified, because for all the millions of tons of stone, For all the precisely carved hieroglyphs, for all the theological sophistication, the bodies of these kings do not last. The pyramids are violated. The mummies are destroyed. The eternal houses are emptied. But we are not yet at that failure. We are still in the 5th and 6th dynasties when pyramid building continues, when the pyramid texts spread from Unuz's pyramid to the pyramids of his successors, Teti, Pepi I, Merenra, Pepi II, each pyramid's burial chamber a library of resurrection spells, each wall a testament to the conviction that death can be overcome through knowledge, through magic, through the proper words spoken in the proper sequence. Let us examine one more pyramid before we consider the role of gold in these structures and the theology they embody. We are now in the Pyramid of Pepi II, the last great pyramid builder of the Old Kingdom, who comes to the throne as a young child and rules for an astonishing length of time. Ancient tradition says 94 years, making him the longest reigning monarch in human history. Modern scholarship is more cautious, suggesting perhaps 64 years, but even this would make his reign longer than any other Egyptian pharaoh whose dates we can verify. Pepi II's pyramid at Saqqara follows the same basic design as his predecessors, a relatively modest structure by 4th dynasty standards, standing perhaps 172 feet high originally, with a base of about 256 feet square. But its burial chambers and corridors are extensively carved with pyramid texts, the most elaborate set of pyramid texts of any pyramid, with numerous utterances not found elsewhere. Descend into Pepi II's burial chamber and you encounter something that appears in many pyramid texts but reaches its fullest expression here, the stellar theology of transformation. Utterance 302 Pepi II version. You are the great star, companion of Orion, who traverses the sky with Orion, who navigates the Duat with Osiris. You ascend from the east of the sky, being renewed in your due season, being rejuvenated in your due time. The sky has borne you with Orion. May you open up the place in the sky among the imperishable stars, for you are the lone star. Orion was identified with Osiris. The constellation's annual disappearance below the horizon and reappearance in the dawn sky mirrored Osiris's death and resurrection. To traverse the sky with Orion is to participate in this cosmic pattern of death and rebirth. But notice the tension in the theology. The king is told he will navigate the Duat with Osiris, chthonic, underworld theology, and also ascend to the sky among the imperishable stars, celestial, stellar theology. These are not the same destination. The Duat is beneath the earth, a dark realm of dangers and transformations. The imperishable stars are in the northern sky, eternally visible, eternally circling. This theological tension, Osirian versus solar, chthonic versus celestial, underworld versus sky, will never be fully resolved in Egyptian theology. Both traditions coexist, sometimes in the same text, sometimes even in the same utterance. The deceased is told to descend to join Osiris in the Duat and to ascend to join Ra in the sky. Apparently, it is possible to do both, or the afterlife exists in multiple simultaneous dimensions, or the contradiction simply doesn't matter because what matters is providing every possible pathway to immortality. But Pepi II's pyramid texts also reveal something else, a growing emphasis on Osirian theology at the expense of solar theology. Where earlier pyramid texts focus heavily on the king's identification with Ra and his solar circuit, Pepi II's texts increasingly emphasize his identification with Osiris, his rule over the dead, his position as judge in the underworld. This shift reflects a broader theological evolution happening during the Old Kingdom. Osiris, the god who died and was resurrected, the god who rules the realm of the dead, is becoming more central to afterlife hopes than Ra, the sun god who achieves immortality through his own divine power rather than through death and resurrection. This Osirian theology is more democratic, more accessible. Ra's immortality is inherent to his divine nature. He is a god, and gods don't truly die. But Osiris was murdered. His body was dismembered. He experienced real death. And yet he was resurrected through the actions of his wife Isis and his son Horus. This suggests that resurrection is achievable even for beings who truly die, which opens the possibility that humans, even non-royal humans, might achieve the same. We will see this democratization of afterlife hopes accelerate in the First Intermediate Period and Middle Kingdom. But its seeds are already present here, in the late Old Kingdom, in the theological texts carved into royal pyramids. Pepi II dies, finally, after a reign of unimaginable length, sometime around 2184 BCE. His death marks the beginning of the end of the Old Kingdom. The centralized state begins to fragment. Regional governors become increasingly independent. The enormous resources required to build pyramids are no longer available. The theological certainty that pyramid building represents begins to erode. But before we trace this collapse, we must address a question we have deferred until now. Where is the gold? We have explored pyramids built of millions of tons of limestone and granite. We have read texts carved into burial chamber walls. We have examined sarcophagi of red granite and basalt. But where is the gold, the divine flesh, the incorruptible material that our series title promises? The answer is mostly gone, stolen in antiquity, but originally present in ways both practical and profoundly theological. The pyramids themselves contained relatively little gold compared to later periods. This is partly because most pyramid burials were thoroughly robbed in antiquity, their contents scattered or melted down. But it is also because Old Kingdom theology emphasized stone, eternal, indestructible, unchanging stone, as the primary material of immortality. Nevertheless, gold was present, and its presence was theologically significant. The pyramidion, the capstone at the apex of the pyramid, was covered in gold or electrum. We have no surviving pyramidia from the Great Fourth Dynasty pyramids of Giza, but we have pyramidia from later pyramids, and they consistently show gold covering or gold leaf. The pyramidion was the point where earth and heaven meet, where the descending rays of the sun touch the earth. It had to be gold, the material of the sun, the flesh of Ra. When sunlight struck the golden pyramidion, the entire pyramid became a ray of light, a beam of divine radiance connecting heaven and earth. The pyramid was not merely a representation of a sunbeam. It became one, through the alchemical transformation of stone into light via its golden apex. Inside the burial chamber, gold appears in more intimate forms. The king's mummy, we can infer from later practices, though no Old Kingdom royal mummies survive intact, would have been adorned with gold amulets, gold finger and toe coverings, a gold mask or covering for the face. These golden elements served a specific function. They transformed the vulnerable mortal flesh into incorruptible divine flesh. Remember the Egyptian understanding of the gods' bodies. The bones of the gods are silver or sometimes iron, their flesh is gold, and their hair is lapis lazuli. To cover the dead king in gold is not decoration. It is literal transformation. The gold is divine flesh. By covering the king's body in gold, you are making him, materially and magically, into a god. We have fragmentary evidence of this practice from the Old Kingdom. At Giza, in the tomb of Queen Hetepheres, mother of Khufu, archaeologists found remnants of gilded furniture, gold vessels, and gold-cased carrying poles. The wood had long since deteriorated, but the gold remained, thin sheets of gold that once covered wooden furniture, now collapsed into gleaming piles. This gold furniture tells us something important. Even furniture, even everyday objects placed in the tomb, were covered in gold to make them eternal. Wood decays, everyone knew this. But gold does not decay. By covering wooden objects in gold, you transform them from mortal wood into a mortal divine substance. The furniture can then accompany the deceased into eternity, functional and permanent. The theological principle is clear. Gold confers immortality on whatever it touches. It is not merely decorative. It is transformative. It is the material of eternity itself. But gold had another significance in Old Kingdom theology. It was the material of Ra himself. The sun's light is golden. Ra's flesh is gold. To cover yourself in gold is to clothe yourself in the substance of the sun god, to participate in his divine nature, to make yourself into a solar being capable of joining Ra's eternal circuit through the sky. This solar association with gold will remain central to Egyptian theology for 3,000 years. Even as Osirian theology becomes more prominent, even as the afterlife is increasingly imagined as a journey through the underworld rather than an ascent to the sky, gold retains its association with Ra, with sunlight, with divine incorruptibility. And there is a practical consideration. Egypt had access to enormous quantities of gold. The deserts east of the Nile, and especially the conquered territories of Nubia to the south, contained rich gold deposits. The Egyptians developed sophisticated mining techniques, sending expeditions deep into the desert, sometimes hundreds of miles from the Nile, to extract gold from veins in the rock. The very word Nubia derives from the Egyptian word nub, meaning gold. Nubia was, to the Egyptians, the gold land, a territory valued primarily for its mineral wealth. The pharaoh's control of Nubian gold gave them access to a material that was rare and precious throughout the ancient Near East. While Mesopotamian kings had to import gold at great expense, Egyptian kings could simply send an expedition south and return with tons of it. This abundance of gold meant that Egypt could use gold in ways other civilizations could not afford. Later pharaohs, as we will see in subsequent episodes, would cover entire sarcophagi in solid gold, create masks of solid gold weighing tens of kilograms, fill tombs with golden furniture and vessels and amulets. But the theological principle is established here. In the Old Kingdom, gold is divine flesh, and covering the dead in gold transforms them into gods. Yet for all the gold, for all the millions of tons of stone, for all the pyramid texts with their hundreds of spells and utterances, the Old Kingdom ends in collapse. Pepi II's death around 2184 BCE is followed by rapid dynastic turnover. The 7th and 8th dynasties are shadowy, their kings ephemeral, their pyramids small and poorly constructed if they exist at all. The central authority of the Old Kingdom, the divine kingship that could command the resources to build mountains of stone, fragments into competing regional powers. This period, called the First Intermediate Period, represents a crisis in Egyptian civilization. The Nile's floods become irregular, some years too low, causing famine, other years too high, destroying villages. The carefully maintained irrigation systems fall into disrepair. Trade networks collapse. The bureaucracy that administered the unified state dissolves into local administrations loyal to regional governors rather than the king. And the pyramids are violated. Tomb robbery, which had occurred sporadically even during the Old Kingdom, becomes systematic during the First Intermediate Period. Organized gangs break into pyramids and mastabas, stripping them of anything valuable: gold, copper, furniture, linen, even the resin used in mummification, which could be sold for medical uses. The mummies themselves are torn apart in the search for hidden amulets and jewelry. This violation represents a theological catastrophe. The entire Old Kingdom system of immortality depended on the inviolability of the tomb. The body must endure. The Ka must receive offerings. The name must be preserved. But if the tomb is robbed, if the body is destroyed, if the name is erased, then the deceased suffers the second death, the true death, annihilation from existence. The pyramid texts, with all their elaborate spells, cannot protect against thieves. The millions of tons of stone cannot stop determined robbers willing to tunnel through walls and corridors. The golden flesh is stripped away and melted down. The incorruptible material proves entirely too corruptible in the face of human greed. Yet this crisis, this failure of the Old Kingdom immortality system, does not lead to despair. Instead, it leads to innovation. If royal power and enormous monuments cannot guarantee immortality, perhaps immortality does not depend on royal power and enormous monuments. If the king's exclusive access to elaborate afterlife provisions has failed to preserve him, perhaps afterlife provisions should be available to everyone who can afford them. If physical protection of the tomb is impossible, perhaps magical protection. Spells written on portable objects, knowledge that travels with the deceased rather than remaining vulnerable in a fixed location, is more reliable. These insights will drive the developments of the Middle Kingdom, which we will explore in our next episode. The pyramid texts will evolve into the coffin texts, democratized versions of royal spells, available to nobles and wealthy commoners, written not on pyramid walls but on wooden coffins that can be sealed and hidden. The exclusive royal afterlife will give way to a more meritocratic afterlife, where righteousness and knowledge matter more than royal birth. But that transformation is still in the future. Here, at the end of the Old Kingdom, we stand amid the ruins of the Pyramid Age, watching the greatest architectural achievement of the ancient world succumb to time, chaos, and human cupidity. Return with me one final time to Giza, but now move forward to the present day. You stand before the Great Pyramid as it exists now 46 centuries after Khufu's death. The white limestone casing is gone, stripped away over centuries to build medieval Cairo. The golden pyramid ion has vanished. The smooth geometric perfection has been replaced by stepped core blocks, weathered and irregular. But the pyramid still stands. It has outlasted every other structure of the ancient world. The hanging gardens of Babylon are gone. The temple of Artemis at Ephesus is rubble. The Colossus of Rhodes is scattered across the seafloor. The lighthouse of Alexandria collapsed in an earthquake. But the pyramids endure. In a profound sense, the Old Kingdom achieved exactly what it set out to achieve. Not immortality for the individual kings buried within. Khufu's mummy is gone. His Ka receives no offerings. His name survives only through his monuments, not through an unbroken cult of veneration. But the pyramids themselves have achieved permanent, unchanging, eternal existence. They are the most enduring human-made structures on Earth. And they continue to do what they were designed to do. They declare the possibility of immortality. They argue, in stone, that human will and imagination can create something that transcends mortality. They prove that death does not have the final word. The theology of the Pyramid Age can be summarized simply. Immortality is achievable through proper preparation, through the right materials, through the right knowledge, through the right relationship with the gods. The pyramid is the architectural embodiment of this theology, a technology of resurrection that combines stone for permanence, orientation for cosmic alignment, internal chambers for the protected body, and eventually texts for magical knowledge into a comprehensive system for defeating death. The pyramid texts add the missing element, the words. Architecture provides the structure, but words provide the power. The spells carved into burial chamber walls are not merely descriptive, they are performative. By inscribing these words, by reciting them, the transformation they describe becomes real. The king ascends to the sky because the text says he ascends. He joins Ra because the text identifies him with Ra. He becomes an imperishable star because the text declares him imperishable. This is the profound Egyptian insight into the relationship between language, reality, and immortality. Words have power. Names have power. To speak something is to make it exist. To write something in permanent form is to make it exist permanently. The hieroglyphs carved into pyramid walls are not symbols representing a reality external to themselves. They are the reality itself, crystallized into permanent written form. And gold is the material correlate to this linguistic power. Words transform symbolically. Gold transforms materially. Together, they form a complete system. The body covered in gold becomes divine flesh. The texts carved in stone provide the knowledge and power to animate that divine flesh. The pyramid structure protects both body and texts, creating an inviolable eternal house. But as we have seen, this system ultimately fails in its immediate practical goal. The bodies decay or are destroyed. The gold is stolen. The tombs are violated. The second death comes for nearly everyone, king and commoner alike. Yet the system succeeds in a larger sense. Because we still know these names. We still read these texts. We still marvel at these pyramids. Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, Unas, Teti, Pepi, they live in human memory and imagination 46 centuries after their bodies turned to dust. They achieved immortality, just not the immortality they expected. In our next episode, we will trace how this old kingdom system evolves after its collapse. We will see how the exclusive royal afterlife democratizes, how Osiris eclipses Ra as the dominant afterlife deity, how the coffin texts adapt the pyramid texts for a wider audience, and how the Middle Kingdom develops a new understanding of immortality, one based not merely on material provision and magical knowledge, but on moral righteousness and the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at. The sun that set on the Old Kingdom will rise again on the Middle Kingdom. The theology of immortality will adapt, will evolve, will find new forms. The conviction that death is not the end will persist, will deepen, will eventually produce the most elaborate funerary culture in human history. But that is the next chapter in our journey through Egyptian eternity. For now, we stand at Giza as the sun sets, watching the pyramids catch the dying light, these mountains of stone that have outlasted empires and millennia, these eternal arguments against death carved into the desert plateau, these testimonies to the human refusal to accept oblivion. The sun descends toward the western horizon. Ra begins his nightly journey through the Duat, battling chaos, facing annihilation, preparing for tomorrow's resurrection. And the pyramids, those petrified rays of sunlight, those crystallized arguments for immortality, stand silhouetted against the dying light, exactly as they have stood for 46 centuries, exactly as they will stand for centuries yet to come. The pyramid builders achieved eternity, just not in the way they imagined.